A young family moved into a quiet, peaceful apartment complex, thinking they had found the perfect home. But just days later, their lives turned into a nightmare. What happened shocked the entire country, and though the case was solved pretty quickly, its impact still echoes to this day, sparking important changes in the law. Mikhail Bush was born on February 13, 1997, in the Canadian province of Alberta. She grew up there with her parents and a younger sister, who was not only incredibly close to her, but also saw her as a role model throughout their lives. Mikhail was a cheerful, energetic, and kind girl, which naturally drew people to her and earned her many friends. One of her biggest passions in life was ice skating. From a young age, she and her parents would often visit local rinks, and over time, it became something she truly loved. While in high school, Mikhail met a boy named Cody, and the two began dating. It didn't take long for them to realize they wanted to spend the rest of their lives together. So after graduation, they started planning their future as a couple. After finishing school, Mikhail got a job at a charity organization that supported people with disabilities. She quickly grew passionate about the work and decided to pursue a career in healthcare so she could continue helping those in need. In 2017, Mikhail enrolled in a local college and earned her nursing degree. After graduating, she returned to her job at the charity center, but shortly after that, something else happened. Mikhail found out she was pregnant. She and Cody were over the moon with joy. Following the happy news, Cody proposed to her in the middle of a rink. In 2020, they welcomed their son Noah and began building their life together as a family. Cody worked in pipeline construction, which meant he was constantly traveling across Canada. It was quite tough. His wife and newborn either had to move around with him or spend weeks without seeing him. But in 2021, he got a new job that finally let him stay in one place. Anyway, with this new job, the family moved to a small town called Hinton. It was a fairly remote area, but for the first time, Cody's work no longer required constant travel, and they could finally settle down and spend more time together. In early September 2021, Mikhail and Cody moved into their new apartment in a residential complex on the outskirts of town. At the time, Mikhail was 24 years old, and their son Noah was just 16 months. The family was thrilled with their new home, surrounded by nature, parks, and a sense of peace and quiet. As you'll hear in the guided meditation, Sarah and Mikhail experienced the new life with their son Noah. On September 16th, Cody left for work as usual, while Mikhail stayed home to take care of their son. His shift ended around 6 p.m. and he headed back, looking forward to spending the evening with his family. But to his surprise, neither Mikhail nor Noah was home, and Cody checked every room and looked out into the yard, but there was no sign of them. At first, he thought Mikhail might have taken Noah for a walk to one of the nearby parks, but then he noticed something odd. Their son's stroller was still inside the apartment, which meant Mikhail couldn't have gone far with him. Then Cody noticed something even more unsettling. On the kitchen table, there were plates with half-prepared food, as if Mikhail had started making lunch, but suddenly stopped and left the house. Cody started to seriously worry and decided to check the nearby parks and playgrounds, thinking Mikhail and Noah might be there. But after searching everywhere, he couldn't find them and returned home, hoping for answers. He began looking up. On top of that, Cody kept trying to call her, but Mikhail wasn't answering her phone. The whole situation felt increasingly bizarre, and Cody decided it was time to call the police. By the time he made the call, one of his friends had arrived at the apartment complex to help. Together, they searched the area again before the police arrived but couldn't find them. It seemed like Mikhail had vanished without a trace. End of case. 150 through 160. The officers arrived shortly after and joined the search. They thoroughly checked the apartment complex, the wooded area behind it, and nearby streets. They also began going door to door, questioning residents in hopes of finding any clues about Mikhail and Noah's whereabouts. Before long, their efforts paid off. One neighbor mentioned seeing a woman who looked like Mikhail running away from the complex toward the road earlier that day, but the name is escaping her. She wasn't screaming or calling for help, and her son wasn't with her. The police decided to follow up on this lead and asked the complex manager for access to the CCTV footage. They reviewed hours of recordings but couldn't find any sign of Mikhail. But then, something completely unexpected caught their attention. Around noon, the same neighbor who claimed to have seen Mikhail was captured on camera carrying 2 large garbage bags out of the building. The police went straight to the dumpster to examine the contents of those bags. When they opened one, they were met with a horrifying sight. Inside was Noah's body, along with some of Michaela's belongings, including her phone. This discovery immediately changed the course of the investigation. After it was learned that the bags had been opened, students went through the woman's personal files and found her wallet, where they found the prescription pad. Detectives knew they had to proceed carefully, as Mikhail's whereabouts were still unknown. They suspected the neighbor was directly involved in the crime and decided to search his apartment, but there was a problem. The man lived right next door to Mikhail's apartment, where Cody and other family members were waiting. The 2 apartments shared a wall, and the police were concerned that what they might find inside the neighbor's apartment could trigger an uncontrollable situation. The warrant officer asked Cody why he wanted to spend the night in jail, and Cody tried to explain he didn't mean it. To avoid this scenario, the officers came up with a plan. They asked Cody and his family members to temporarily leave their apartment, explaining that investigators needed to conduct a thorough examination. What they didn't tell Cody was that his son's body had just been discovered only a few dozen yards away. As soon as Cody left, the police went straight to the neighbor's apartment. They requested permission to search the unit, and the man voluntarily agreed. When investigators reached the bathroom, they found Molly. Her body was lying in the tub. After this heartbreaking discovery, the neighbor, 53-year-old Robert Major, was immediately arrested. Detectives now had to piece together what had happened inside that apartment. While waiting for medical examiners to determine the exact causes of death, the police began looking into Robert's background. What they found was truly shocking. Robert had an extensive criminal record spanning several decades. He had been charged more than 24 times, mostly for sexual offenses. But despite his repeated arrests, Robert had only served short prison sentences. During his time in custody, he was evaluated by multiple psychiatrists, and he openly admitted to them that he really enjoyed committing these acts and took pleasure in his crimes. With multiple expert evaluations on record, authorities knew for sure Robert was likely to reoffend. But instead of keeping him behind bars after his numerous crimes, he was released in 2016. The only measure the police took was to issue a public warning, informing the community about Robert and the threat he posed. Robert was also required to register in a special offender database. He was banned from living near women, children, schools, or playgrounds, prohibited from leaving his city, which was located about 190 miles from Hinton, and ordered to meet with a police representation on a regular basis. But these restrictions quickly became irrelevant. Canadian law basically removed individuals from the registry and lifted their restrictions if they went a year without committing another crime. Because of this, Robert fell off the radar of law enforcement several years before the tragedy. At some point, he moved to Hinton and settled in a residential complex filled with families and children, and living in Polton County, which let him out. None of the local police officers were aware of his criminal history. The management of the apartment complex, even if they wanted to, had no way of accessing this information, let alone the residents themselves. And all taken together, her autograph from Sam Solomon is the last thing, and then I walk out the door. Medical experts soon completed their examination of the bodies, while Robert, shortly after his arrest, gave a partial confession. His words shocked even the most seasoned investigators. On top of that, they managed to gather additional evidence and witness statements that helped piece together the full picture of what happened on that fateful day. Section 3 of the Book of Canaan River. On Section 3 of the Book of Canaan River is the following paragraph. listing the most seasoned investigators. On top of that, they managed to gather additional evidence and witness statements that helped piece together the full picture. That morning, Mikhail and Noah went for a walk in the nearby park. When they returned home, the building manager approached Mikhail to discuss an issue. The problem was that Cody, who worked on pipelines, would often come home with his boots and clothes covered in dirt, leaving muddy tracks all the way to their apartment door. The manager asked Mikhail to address the situation, and she promised to clean it up right away. After their conversation, Mikhail went back inside, put Noah down for a nap, and started preparing lunch. Around this time, she also called a friend. This friend later recalled hearing a knock at Mikhail's door during their conversation, followed by a man's voice. He offered to help clean the hallway. "Is this the guy who told you that if you wear this, you'll smell like Burt Reynolds?" But the friend didn't catch the rest of the exchange. Shortly after, Mikhail returned to the kitchen, finished her call, and sent a message to a family member around 2 p.m. From there, one critical question remained unanswered for investigators. How did Mikhail end up in Robert's apartment? Robert himself refused to clarify this particular moment, leaving police to speculate. Perhaps he lured her there under some pretense, maybe by continuing the conversation about cleaning the hallway or asking for her help with something else. And finally, perhaps this conversation was the catalyst for Robert walking the nurse home, where he raped her and made sexual comments on Lyndon. One way or another, Mikhail ended up inside Robert's apartment, and this is where his confession began. Almost immediately after she walked through the door, he attacked her and tried to strangle her. For nearly 10 minutes, he struggled to succeed. In the end, he managed to kill her and then essay her. He then dragged her body to the bathroom before taking her to her apartment, where he took Noah and ended his life as well. After committing these horrific acts, Robert placed Noah's body along with Mikhail's clothes and belongings into garbage bags and dumped them in a container outside the building. It seemed he had no further plan, as Mikhail's body was simply left in the bathroom. Although he tried to mislead investigators by claiming that M had run off from the complex, he was possibly hoping that police wouldn't think to look inside his apartment. Once outside, he claimed Mikhail's body was left in the compound and then entered the garbage, erected to look inside his apartment. As for his motives, they remain unclear. The details of the case, including the full account of his confession, were never made fully public. Investigators shared only bits of information with the media, leaving room for speculation. The reason behind M's murder was relatively straightforward. Not only did Robert find satisfaction in causing harm, but he also killed her with the intent of SA. However, Noah's murder was more perplexing. Investigators suggested that Robert may have killed him out of fear that Noah could identify him. Another theory is that Noah woke up and started crying, which may have scared Robert, thinking the noise could draw attention from the neighbors. One way or another, Robert's main motive became crystal clear through his numerous conversations with psychiatrists. He simply took genuine pleasure in harming others, especially those who were physically weaker than him. It's worth noting that even prison didn't stop him. During one of his previous sentences, Robert assaulted a cellmate, which led to additional charges. When news of this case spread across the country, many were horrified not only by the brutality of the crime, but also by the fact that such a dangerous man had been allowed to live freely. Public outrage grew even stronger when details of what happened during the trial came to light. But more on that later. Robert openly admitted to psychiatrists that he enjoyed committing such crimes, and all of them agreed there was a very high likelihood he would do it again. But despite this, he was released back into society, and eventually, authorities stopped monitoring him altogether. His true life became more and more interesting to him every day. One day in late 2013, the residents of that complex had no way of knowing about his criminal past either. Even if he had remained on a sex offender registry, the system in Canada works very differently than in the US. In Canada, only law enforcement officials can access the registry, not the general public. This left many Canadians outraged as the laws prioritized protecting the privacy of a predator but failed to protect Mikhail and her son. The family had moved into that complex just 15 days before the tragedy, only to become victims of a man who lived literally next door. This devastating injustice pushed Cody and the rest of the family to fight for change. They became actively involved in drafting a new piece of legislation named in Noah's memory. The main goal of the bill was to ensure that repeat offenders are monitored for their entire lives, not just for a short period after their release. The bill also proposed creating a public registry of these offenders so anyone could easily check if someone with a criminal past was living in their area. As for Robert, he didn't deny his guilt, so the trial moved pretty quickly, but before sentencing, his final statement shocked everyone and once again raised the question of why someone like him was ever released. He openly admitted that he should remain in prison for the rest of his life because even he would fear what he might do if he were ever free again. As for Robert, certainly everything would be better if he were ever free again. At the same time, he claimed he still saw himself as a good person, despite everything he had done. In the end, Robert was sentenced to life in prison. But there was a catch. He would still be eligible for parole in 25 years. If he lives that long, he'll be 78 years old, and there's no guarantee he wouldn't still pose a threat to others, even at that age. As for the bill the victim's family is fighting for, progress has been frustratingly slow. Despite years of advocacy, the legislation still hasn't been passed, and it's unclear if it ever will be. Share your thoughts on this story in the comments section, and don't forget to press the like button if you enjoyed my video. Thank you for watching.